Hi guys, I'm in Buryatia. I'll tell you about the most stunning and lovely natural locations in this video. Winter Baikal, grand mountains, an enigmatic plateau, and several beautiful vistas may all be found here. I should tell you about Ulan-Ude first though. Regarding the national's capital, the face of Buryatia that greets nearly every visitor, there is cause for surprise. But it's hard to characterize these feelings as positive. To tell the truth, Buryatia's capital appears to be miserable. I don't want to avoid that word. When the taxi driver informs me that we're nearing the city's core on our trip from the airport, I turn to face the center and think, is this the center? Really? How do the suburbs feel like though? The hostel was located in the heart of the city, a 10 minutes walk from the main central square, and I felt like I was in some sort of slum the entire way there. There were crumbling facades, mounds of snow and ice, old peeling signs, and, to top it all off, a smoking factory surrounded by warehouses along the railway. The Trans-Siberian Railway splits Ulan-Ude in two, and overall the entire capital may be described as an outdated, rundown train station. I have never seen poverty like this anyplace else. There are two stunning buildings in all of Buryatia, excluding the Datsans, and they're located on the Square of Soviets, where a monument honoring Lenin greets us. True, just a portion of it, not the entire one. This is where the largest Lenin head in the world is located. And he observes the tree for the new year, encircled by dozens of wise sculptures. It's really lovely. The only really remarkable buildings are the Ministry of Finance and the principal opera and ballet theater, which are constructed in an odd but incredibly lovely design. Since Lenin, I must admit that I was not at all surprised by the red star on the spire. The square gives a start to a unique 3-kilometer walking trail. And after strolling down it for perhaps 100 meters, these are the beautiful vistas that you can see. Is it important to mention that there is no sewage or heating in any of these rundown shacks? Just imagine that some people who live in the center of the city don't have toilets inside their houses. And it's just 100 yards away from the square. Due to the general absence of gas, almost everyone uses coal or wood to heat their homes. As a result, massive pollution clouds are always looming over the city. I asked the locals what this was when I first saw it. Was it haze or fog of some sort? It ended up being even worse. To be quite honest, breathing in such utterly unnatural conditions is perfectly typical. However, I felt uneasy about being in the capital when I realized how much filth I was breathing in. In other places, I was frequently unsure of the weather ahead of me due to the haze. The surrounding landscape changed dramatically as soon as you leave the capital. Up high, the city appears even more depressing. To be honest, it's not that bad. I was simply a little appalled by what I saw of the city. Nonetheless, pleasant spots can be found if you search around, such as multiple sizable clusters of interesting graffiti. Art festivals are regularly held in Ulan-Ude, when young artists adorn the city with their works. In any event, this adorns the streets rather than concealing the slums. It is safe to classify some artworks as masterpieces. Here, new structures are being constructed, albeit slowly. Furthermore, there are a few good streets close to the city's main church. For instance, some extremely well-preserved and even renovated houses with antique carvings may be found here. For those who enjoy antiquities, viewing the houses can be rather fascinating, because each one is unique. The street is nice indeed. It has charming lanterns, tidy homes, a friendly cuddly cat who seemed quite interested in my b-boy for lunch, and a view of the enormous snow-white cathedral. Afterwards, I visited another square where a few merchant homes were still standing and in reasonable condition. They told me they were almost like Saint-Petersburg's when they were promoting them. However, I wouldn't level such charges against St. Petersburg. Our historic core is incomparable with what I saw there. Though the street is undoubtedly excellent by local standards. The customary market excursion on my channel was the final goal. There, the national character is too powerful for me to resist. I saw 12 stores with ants, national footwear made of reindeer fur, as I got closer to the main structure. This is how they seem on the inside. A pair of shoes might cost anything between 150 and 300 euros here. According to what I understand, the cost is determined by the quantity of decorations and the fur's color. The reason for the exorbitant price is that they only use the fur from the deer's shin. I'm not sure how many reindeer it takes to produce one pair of ants, certainly quite a number. Dmitry and I then investigated to the market's open area. This woman is selling nuts and giving cedar nuts to the sparrows. Fun but expensive entertainment. Dmitry purchased some nuts and offered one to the birds. They did not even consider approaching him from the air. They decided that they would only eat from people they knew well. There, the market was active, which was great. Even so, I was able to record a couple offers while hiding behind other shelves. We all meet the lines of meat, fruit, and fat, and instead arrive at a table containing some extremely peculiar items. It was discovered to be a naturally occurring resin, which some people still like to chew on instead of gum. I purchased a few items since I was enticed to give it a try. The flavor is so intense that words cannot express how much I enjoyed it. However, the resin is really stuck on my teeth. Cones were another item they were selling, and the smell was incredible. That's the scent of a newly fallen coniferous forest. There is also an abundance of unique tea from Mongolia and Tibet here. It's solid and comes in briquettes. Most people here drink tea with milk, which is terrible to me, but apparently acceptable to others. Гриб.
Да, они большими такими кусками растут на березе. Подкалывают, сушат и потом заваривают чай.
We'll meet up with Dmitry for another journey later. And now let's go to Baikal. It is impossible to live 100 kilometers away from the world's largest lake and not go there. However, I had to select a group tour over an independent travel for some reason. And in Buryatia, that was the biggest mistake I made. Everything went well at first. We made a stop at a location of power even before sunrise. Someone left gifts to the spirits, most likely to ensure our safe travel. Additionally, we had to navigate a challenging pass that was frequently covered in a thick layer of fog. However, some people even believed it to be clouds. The peak was not very high above sea level still. Baikal is generally highly obstinate and inconsistent. For instance, our journey began somewhat depressingly, with a gloomy sky and wet snow. I was even a little depressed, wondering what kind of photos would turn out in such conditions. But the clouds broke to reveal a blue sky when we made the first significant stop at the Turtle Monument, and it cheered me up. The turtle itself is a massive boulder shaped like a turtle. It appears even funny in the summer, as though the animal really emerged from the sea. There is even a mythology about it because of its true likeness, which states that it comes to life for one night during the spring full moon. But I thought the most fascinating thing was still ahead of us. This location was our first, and incidentally, last observation of the fractured Baikal ice. The formation of hummocks occurs because of crevasses when big ice flows flow in and out. Elegance. The fact that you could walk on it safely and not worrying about falling through was the nicest feature. I was able to examine the fissures themselves, the steps, whose origin isn't clear, a massive wall of icicles covering yet another enormous stone, and several ice compositions. It was really beautiful. And 15 minutes later, barely having considered launching B-Boy, a loud cry, "Get in the car, let's go!" shattered the lovely Baikal stillness. Ahead of time. Oh my, how come already? This was the tour's primary issue. We were on Baikal for approximately 1.5 hours altogether. On the way there and back, we stopped at cafes for 2 hours. The entire route was running via parks and natural areas and was very lovely. We traveled through endless, snow-covered coniferous forests, and the brilliant sunshine only served to heighten our sense of happiness and exhilaration. We are finally near Baikal. We'll soon arrive to the most fascinating place. We made a halt at a strange location en route, where the people used to worship the spirits that ruled these lakes and woodlands. The peculiar river that never freezes must have been a factor in their decision to place the sculptures here. Its water is, of course, freezing cold. This didn't stop some individuals from filling their empty bottles, though. The route went on, and the next destination was just the beach of Baikal, which was blanketed in snow, plus a few of gazebos. That's it. Indeed, we arrived at the Chiverkui Bay observation platform. It's frequently referred to as Baikal's most picturesque bay, and the summer months bring the hottest water. Overall, a destination that really has to be seen. Here we ascended the stairs, and the vistas all around us cried out to be photographed. Beyond the ruts and snow, we could see 2 islands from the observation point. But there is some ambiguity around the islands of Baikal. For instance, it is theoretically feasible to go to these islands by boat in the summer or by ice in the winter. However, it is absolutely prohibited. Though it's from a distance, this observation point is generally the only place to get a view of the islands. I'm clueless about the limitations. It was time to travel to the route's most fascinating and attractive point. It concerns what draws in all winter visitors. A number of grottoes where, with any luck, a large number of icicles may be visible. We were really fortunate that being nearly the first group to visit Chiverkui this year, all of the icicles were still in place. It was truly amazing. Because of their extreme fragility, it is not even advised to speak loudly inside the grottoes, to prevent sound waves from inadvertently dropping a few icicles directly onto someone's skull. Just take a look at how many there are. Both giant and small ice daggers fill the entire cave. The hardest part was trying not to break them, because the grotto was filled with pure ice, which made shoes slide on it better than any skates. And you couldn't fully straighten your ankles due to the wall's height. I was so enthralled with the location that I shot several pictures, which wasn't something I did very often. Elegance. Outside, where we were met by somewhat different icicles, known as sakui, it was as lovely. Waves slamming on the surface create sakui, or surges of water on the rocks. The sakui come into full power as soon as the lake's ice cover forms. The ice turns turquoise, and the splashes climb high and get thicker. The icicles within the grottoes are incredibly elegant and completely translucent. My Irkutsk friend once told me that Baikal is great year-round, since you're always happy there. And I believe her to be 100% accurate. Despite the crowds, I could feel the mood and sense of peace here. And that is quite a statement. The guide reported that nearly nothing remained of this beauty when she visited the previous year, because all the icicles had already broken off. Because it's vital to be absolutely certain of the thickness of ice required for the passage, the route to the grottoes normally opens very late. Additionally, because icicles melt extremely quickly, you may typically only view them for about a month. That was sadly the end of our luck. We were promised pristine, transparent Baikal ice, the kind with numerous bubbles and eternal cracks in the tour advertisement. It turned out to be a complete fabrication. It's rare to see clear ice from Buryatia's side. There is a thick blanket of snow-white snow covering the entire area because there aren't any significant gusts. Everyone was crammed into the bus, and we headed in the other direction after 30 minutes. Yeah, we spent as much as 30 minutes in such a beautiful place, which is 5 hours one way. Now for a few fascinating facts about Baikal. For instance, you can walk on ice that is already 10 centimeters thick at the start of winter. Additionally, the surface trembles with every step, which may somewhat agitate people. The ice in the lake is always changing. Sometimes it splits and the ice floes separate, creating cracks up to 3 meters wide where water crashes through. Furthermore, the weather in this area is incredibly unpredictable. The guide recounted how, during an excursion to the caves the previous year, there was an intense snowstorm that prevented the group from returning home, forcing them to spend the night on Baikal. And then suddenly, a miraculous occurrence transpired. I saw a lone newborn seal in the middle of the snow. Yeah, the baby really had to be saved. Therefore, I made the decision to bring him home right away. Holy Nose, a humorously named peninsula that is the only sizable mountainous peninsula on Baikal, was where we stopped on the way back. There is a high plateau at the summit, offering stunning views of the base. However, the ascent to the plateau and return takes an entire day, so all we had to do was observe the Holy Nose from below. It grew noticeably chilly outside as the sun gradually started to set. Can you imagine that Baikal -20 felt like Yakutsk -40 at the same time? In general, we drove home, arriving back in Ulan-Ude closer to midnight. After making the final stop at another cafe, where everyone had a snack. Despite all of the obstacles, I was glad that I decided to visit Baikal. Neither a badly planned tour, nor tight schedules, nor failure with pure clear ice could ruin my impressions of this natural wonder. The following day, I made the decision to visit the Gengis Khan plateau, another unique spot. The tradition behind its name states that Khan himself stood atop the peak, surveying and telling thousands of his soldiers in the valley below. The plateau is several hundred meters above sea level and has really amazing dimensions. The formation process is not well understood, because the area resembles a mountain with a completely leveled summit. Standing at the very edge is a little unsettling, to be honest, since you can see the deepest abyss covered in enormous, sharp and not so sharp stones. However, the drone's perspective is far more expressive, because the height gives him a full view of the scene. Fortunately, the wind wasn't too strong, so I spent the most of my time walking around the edge in search of the greatest views. Brightly colored scarves draped from another tree, which was the first thing that welcomed us. On the plateau, there is even a local troll tongue. However, having visited Norway previously, I can state with all honesty that this stone and the actual troll tongue are completely different. One of the stones on the hill is positioned and shaped like a frog. It's not difficult to estimate the silhouette of a jumping frog, even in the presence of snow. The residents anticipate watching the stone tumble into the abyss, since it tilts more and more each year. Regarding rocks, due to the presence of a stone garden, this plateau is the most genuine attraction. Sincerely, a statement like that begs questions. Therefore, I went to their place. And what did I observe there? Only a few stones resting against each other. Yeah, it's quite lovely, but it's a bit of a mixed bag. Pine trees with almost no snow, since the sun melts it so fast. Grass emerging from under the layer of snow. And more ribbons. What would the world be without them? Look at that pine tree. It's been struck by lightning 3 or 4 times now, for whatever reason. All of the blows of fate go to one pine tree. The other one near it is doing just well. all this wonderful nature. I came onto the white stone, which is revered by shamans, while returning to the car. They perform ceremonies here, and everything around is naturally draped in scarves and ribbons. It is impossible to think of Buryatia as being separate from religions. Wherever you go in this amazing region, you will undoubtedly come across Buddha statues, stupas, shells, or locations for shamanic rituals and spirit worship. My next trip, which Dmitry and I are taking, will serve as evidence of this. We're going to Bayan-Hangor Mountain, home of Russia's largest Buddha image, at 33 meters tall. In addition to the fact that the locations are simply breathtaking, I wanted to leave the capital to experience more of the surrounding landscape. However, there was only one issue. It was honestly getting harder and harder for me to force myself to go to the next shoot every day at the end of the trip, since I was so exhausted from the hectic schedule. My camera hand's fingers had been unnaturally painful for the last 3 days, and I had no desire to take any pictures on the day of the journey to the Buddha image. Mounting? Are you deranged? I'm done with mounting. However, as soon as we escaped the city and I took in the surrounding landscape, I pulled out B-Boy and started to explore. That's how our adventure started. Several of the modest Buddhist datsun that we passed in the villages and tiny hamlets occasionally made it into the picture. The vast plains that stretched for tens of kilometers. The little mountains that the locals refer to as sopkas, and the stunning blue sky were all rather repetitive. The grass is pretty strange, and given that the snow is positioned between the plants rather than on top of it, it is most likely fairly stiff. Such snow-covered pale yellow fields in January are remarkable. Before heading up the mountain, Dmitry recommended that we stop at a cafe. This was my first time ordering buzzes. It was later discovered that in order to avoid looking like me, you must know how to consume them properly. Dmitry attempted to instruct me, but I suppose practice makes perfect. In any case, it turns out that buzzes, although part of this region's traditional cuisine, are not a Burят innovation. They originated in Asia. However, it's unclear exactly where. Possibly in Tibet or China. However, boove is a food that is unique to the Burят people. It tastes like an extremely sweet puff pastry. And now, after a few hours, here we are. It should be noted that the activity itself was predicated on our driving to the mountain's base and hiking up. In a sense, it was a 7-mile hike, but I didn't have the stamina or the will to hike up the mountain. Anyway, I pleaded with Dmitry to drive up, as far as the car and the road would allow. Since I didn't have to complete this easy hike on my own, I must admit that there were moments on the route when the gradient was so great that I was practically beaming with joy. When we finally arrived at the end of the road and parked, we felt quite fortunate. We still had some mountain climbing to do, but that was a minor inconvenience.
Приехали на гору к статуе 33-метрового Будды. И атмосфера здесь, конечно, просто шикарная. Полное умиротворение.
This area is covered in a great deal of cedar, and the mountains resemble pillars when viewed from above. Thus, now it's a fantastic moment to launch B-Boy. And this is an image, or rather a sculpture of Buddha. It gets its name from the fact that the rock's contours were originally chiseled before being painted. 33 meters. Although the snow has partially covered everything, especially the legs, it still appears large-scale. This is how it looks in the summer. It was selected to represent the Buddha here, since this location had traditionally been holy to Buddhists. He's really young. The concept was developed roughly 10 years ago, and unlike all other monuments and sculptures, he faces Moscow instead of the south. Dmitry carried milk with him to offer it to the rock's spirit. Many people here think that every mountain has a lord of its own, and that's used the weather to keep you out of his territory. Ultimately, the decision was made to offer something to the Buddha directly, following a standard Buddhist practice. Following that, we ascended to the observation deck, which was challenging to reach due to snow-covered stairs. First of all, there was another statue here that was covered in coins. I briefly even felt like taking them. I held back, though, as it's probably not a good idea to take away the Buddha's offerings. Coins are left here practically on every corner, and there are quite a few collectors in Buryatia who just stroll around and take them away. I took in the breathtaking scenery of the area while crossing the bridge to another rock. And at last, after the filming was finished, I could feel the atmosphere, that of a holy, prayerful place. I was so at ease that I simply stood staring at the horizon and breathed in the cleanest pine air. It felt like it was almost springtime here, maybe because of the true proximity to the sun, which warmed me. The sound of birdsong, complete peace, and the setting sun. I was waiting to observe the Buddha's hue change as the sun sank. We drove down, and the breathtaking scene in front of us made the wait worthwhile. Dmitry claims that the Buddha himself smiled at us, so perhaps everything is possible. It resembles a film. That was a wonderful way to end my journey. Buryatia is home to many truly remarkable locations and breathtakingly stunning scenery. I will most certainly return, unquestionably for Baikal's winter, to view more unadulterated natural charms. Thanks for watching, and bye-bye.
Держи. Спасибо.
Ha ha ha!